look at grants and possibly low interest loans, though right now Public Works Trust Fund monies that used to be at 0% and 1% just aren't available. And then from there, do something similar to the lower half of page 4, where you rank those projects, decide which ones you want to focus on first, and then also decide what the debt instrument would be. So again, as an example, with voted bonds, typically we'll see community center projects, civic center, parks acquisition, but definitely not city hall bonds. We find that the lowest success rate in Washington would be for a voted city hall project. So save your non-voted debt for a city hall project. You know, a lot of the voter approved bonds you'll see for public safety, police, fire. Parks are sort of 50-50, depending on the economy. Of course, your water and sewer debt is not counted against your debt capacity, so that's, you don't have to worry about that. Again, you know, you may come into grant monies. Page 5 shows the debt capacity calculation. And basically, you're allowed, with voter approval, 3 purposes. And so when you take 2.5% of your assessed valuation for voter approved debt, that's allowed for general purpose, for parks, open space, civic center, and then also for utility purposes. We rarely see utility purposes used. It was used in the 1960s. We call it the Safeco field effect, because if you need to build those water and sewer improvements, then you really shouldn't go to the voters, because if they turn it down and then you turn around and issue revenue bonds, then you're going to jeopardize their confidence and trust. So really, that last category you don't even count. Now, debt capacity is similar to credit card capacity for all of our individual budgets. Just because you have the debt capacity doesn't necessarily mean you can afford it. So you make sure that it's within your legal debt limit, but then you have to have someone from the finance department look at that and say, okay, can we handle this new payment of, say, $200,000 a year? Is that within our general fund budget to handle that new payment, also considering future adds to staff, inflation of operating costs, and other things? So again, when you look at the general purpose, with voter approval, you have 2.5% of your assessed valuation. On a non-voted basis for general purpose, you're allowed 1.5%. So that means if we look at row 2, your non-voted debt capacity is $20,578,000 less your outstanding 2006 limited tax general obligation bond for the downtown revitalization project. That gives you a remaining balance in row 6 of just over $16 million. With voter approval in row 11, then you have $28.5 million remaining.
I know a few years ago we tried to go out for a city campus bond. It was going to be we went for the voted route because there wasn't money available in non-voted to make those payments back over a long period every time, because with the voted bond, and we would get the property tax issued for them to increase their levy instead of going non-voted. We determined for an $8 million, I think it was a 7.6 or 7.5 million project that would. To do it non-voted, we just wouldn't have the annual payments to be able to make each year.
Yeah. One thing to keep in mind is when you, typically when you go out for a voted bond, the financing term would be for 25 years or less. For a revenue bond, in Washington, the law reads that you can finance it for 40 years or less, but the reality is 30 years if you're looking at amounts, say, over $2 million. On a voted bond, we've seen cities look at 25 and 30-year financings if the dollar amount justifies it. Like, we don't like to see, a $2 million project financed over 30 years. It's just too long. It's too much interest cost. But there's different ways you can. There's different options when you're structuring these payment schedules, where maybe you have interest-only payments the first few years. You're counting on, like for a water sewer revenue bond, we're getting ready to issue bonds now for, actually it's the city of Yelm. So they have adopted a series of rate increases for the next 5 years. And they just, 16% this year, the next 4 years thereafter will be 8% a year. So our payments will start out interest only, and then about 6 years from now, they'll have principal and interest payments. So that way, the ratepayers and the city are easing into it. And it's also a great structure when you're in a down economy like we're experiencing right now.
To get underwritten for that type of a revenue bond where it sounds like they adopted prospectively those increases, ramping them up. If you have a proposal or a plan to do that, yet adopt incrementally, will you get underwritten for that, or does it needs to be enacted?
Yeah, ideally, it would be nice if there's formal action by council that says, okay, this is our plan, at least to have a rate study that would support that, and then have some sort of action from council that would support it. Is any questions on debt capacity?
How does this compare in your experience, our current status and our current capacity? Where do most municipalities our size float in terms of how much they've used out of their capacity?
Yeah, I think you're in fine shape. It's sort of a function of how much outstanding debt you have, and then what types of tax revenues you're bringing in. So the city of Centralia, we're getting ready to issue bonds here in about 2 weeks. Their regular property tax revenues dropped from $2 million down to $600,000 because they agreed to turn over their fire service to Riverside Fire Authority there in Centralia. So they basically gave up 50 cents per thousand so that they no longer will have the cost of providing fire service. But yeah, we're still waiting to see how the rating agencies will respond to that. So on the one hand, their revenue dropped, 75% almost, well, 70%. But then their sales tax revenue for utility taxes, hotel motel taxes, sales taxes have been growing steadily in this economy because they have the outlet mall. So it might be a different situation with your city if your property tax revenues drop 70%. So it's sort of a case-by-case situation. But ideally, we don't want to see that you're going to be maxing out your non-voted debt capacity. It happened to the city of Pasco a number of years ago where they pretty much used it all up, and then they had to wait until they paid down that debt. So you want to have that flexibility. But yeah, I don't have an exact percentage. Sorry for the long answer.
Jim, it looks like on here the downtown revitalization bond shows up in both areas, the voted and the non-voted.
Right. Yeah, you have to do that because it's counting overall. So what that means then is that with voter approval, you're at 28.5 million. So for instance, if you took on a $16 million voted bond, I gotta think about this. Doing my math on the fly here.
If it's one way you could read it, if it's you've got you could max out your non-voted of 20 million.
Exactly. Yeah.
That leaves you with, you could go out for a voted bond for another 14
right
million to max out your total general obligation.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
So